The internet has been split down the middle. Console fanboy war bullshit is in full swing. And it's all because of a little game called Starfield. Starfield has come out, and the Xbox community is obviously very, very happy with it, as they would be. And it's had great reviews, coming out at 86% on Metacritic, which is nothing to be snubbed at. That's for damn sure. Certainly not the game of the generation talk they were giving it, but 86 still really, really strong. Really, really happy for them. However, not all is well at the moment. Not all is well at all. And that is because certain reviewers are being put under the spotlight and given a lot of shit. Now, what we're going to go through today is the kind of purpose of reviews, how you should treat them, what they mean, and how you kind of bring someone's opinion. Because, of course, remember, a review is always just an opinion. They are always biased because it is an opinion. You cannot have a factual review. A fully just factual review is impossible. But before we get into that, and we get into that whole discussion, we have had some listener mail. Let's play the jingle. There once was a show some time ago that asked 4 questions every fortnight or so. It became so rare they weren't prepared to have a verse or rhyme. Oh God, I'm scrambling now to get a word that rhymes, so how can I wrap this up? I'll take this mail and go. Gotta say, I'm quite happy with that one. So our first listener mail is from the hot dog himself, Lurian. He's written in. He says, how would you design your own Metacritic? Final Fantasy 16 has 150 reviews on Metacritic, coming out a score at 87. Starfield has 50 reviews, and the Metacritic is 86. Sea of Stars has just 19 reviews, but the Metacritic is 90. And he says, I'd only allow scores of games that get 50 reviews on the dot, no more or less from trusted vetted pro outlets. And I'd hide the actual number and convert it into letter grades. S tier to D tier. Any lower is an F. That way games can't be weaponized. If it's an 83 versus 85, they'd both just be A tier, etc. Also, user reviews would require 2-step verification and a grace period to stop review bombs. Great little ideas there, Lurian. Now, guys, let's throw it over to yourself. How would you design your own Metacritic? Would you change it from what it is currently? And for those that don't know, for the audience now, Metacritic is really where they just pool all the results from different reviewers together, and depending on the kind of status of a reviewer and the outlet that they represent, the score is then dictated up. So some have more weight than others. An IGN will have more than, say, I don't know, Bob's podcast. And that's how they do it in Metacritic. Guys, how would you design your own one? Phil, let's come across to you.
Well, Davey, I've been pondering this one for a little while, and I think it is the impossible task. I don't think you're ever going to please everybody, because when people put a review forward, when they put a rating for a game, they have some attachment to that game and they want their views to be the right views that other people listen to. You know, we're on a pedestal, and Spencer said Metal Gear Solid is 6 out of 10. He wants our listeners, our viewers, to believe that Metal Gear Solid is a 6 out of 10. Obviously, Davey, myself, we both disagree. We both rate it as a 9 or a 10 out of 10. Almost a perfect game. You can't get better. But unfortunately, different people have different opinions, and I think this is why we have this problem. I actually quite like the way Metacritic do it. And unfortunately, we've got a couple of minutes now on the podcast to kind of throw out a few hypotheticals and get a bit crazy with it, which is fun, right? But ultimately, there's some much more intelligent people, and they've spent a lot longer time than we have thinking about this to come out with the actual answer to how to design Metacritic. And I'm sure they're always changing. They're always trying to push the button. They're always trying to get more accurate. And I do like what the hot dog himself has sort of suggested with this. And I could see that kind of helping, but I don't want to change it away from the numeric scores to a letter score, because you're almost hiding some information there, and I don't think that's a great way to do it. I think it should be all out in the open. You should be able to see who's reviewed at what score, and then you just get the aggregate. Ultimately, you make a decision as a consumer to believe this review. If you're a Spencer fan, you're believing Metal Gear Solid is a 6 out of 10, and that's what you go with. A lot of what Spencer says on this podcast, probably you agree with. But if you agree more with me and you think, Metal Gear Solid's a 10 and you like my views, maybe that's the one you'll believe. But equally, mine and Davey's views differ a lot on certain subjects, but we both rate the same game at a 10. So it all depends where you align and what you want to just believe. So ultimately, it's an individual basis. And for my personal take, I quite enjoy Metacritic. I don't really see a problem with it. I wouldn't change it.
Great answer, Phil. Great answer. And you're alluding to what we will go on to discuss in a short moment as well. Love that. Great little bit there. Spence, what about yourself?
Sure, so kind of similar to Phil, I would basically keep everything the same. I don't think letter grades is a good idea. I very much agree with Phil in where everything should be out in the open. Everything should be. But the one thing I would mainly implement is that you can only review a game or put an opinion on a game if you link, say, your PlayStation account or your Xbox account and you have at least 10 or 12 hours in that game. And then you can drop a review. Because review bombing is a genuine problem. Where, say, when Last of Us 2 came out, that game got review bombed to hell. And so many of those reviews, they never even played that game. They literally didn't play it. They read the script, saw what happens early on, and just bombed it. And Xbox fanboys just bombed it anyway. And there's always just bombing back and forth between Xbox and PlayStation. And it's just petty. It's stupid. It's unnecessary. The console war should have ended years ago, and it's somehow still going. That is something they need to implement. Not a two-factor verification or anything, because people will just get past that easy. It's like when it pops up saying, "Are you 18?" It's like, yes. Yeah, I'm actually 12, sat behind my screen, but of course I'm going to say I'm 18. Doesn't do anything. You can just lie. When's your date of birth? Oh, 1920, they'll say. Because they don't know. They'll be like, I'm definitely 18 then. And it's going to let them in. It's ridiculous. So what I think it needs is that kind of syncing to your accounts. And it shows you've put this amount of time in. Kind of similar to how Steam does it, where it gives you the review, but it also tells you exactly how much time that person spent in the game at the time of the review. So it'll say, if someone leaves a review on Steam, it'll say they've put 600 hours in, they submitted this review 40 hours in, but then it'll show that they've gone on to keep playing that game. So some people are review bombing a game, saying it's got some issues, but then they're still playing it, showing that it's got some longevity. And stuff like that. That's nice. We need a system like that in Metacritic, and then I think it would be perfect. But at the same time, anyway, just play what you want to play. Who cares? Really? I mean, so if you're swaying on a game, sure, you'll watch a review. But ask your friends, ask like-minded people, ask people who like the same stuff as you. A lot of people just get bought now. A lot of people have different opinions. Sure, there are people you can trust. Just listen to them. Metacritic scores don't matter as much, anywhere near as much as people you genuinely trust, to me. So that's how I'd fix the service, is by having that syncing system. But other than that, just keep it the same, really. Maybe separate the scores like you can on Rotten Tomatoes, where it has the critic score and then the audience score. Something like that.
Okay, lovely little things. I agree with much of what you guys are saying, what you guys are putting down and picking up here. I totally agree with you. I think the system at the moment is fine. I don't think there's an issue with it. The thing with Metacritic is, on the reviewer stakes, is that it is solely a guide, as Phil said. It's there to be able to judge and to be able to look at it and say, right, okay, they've rated this low. Let me go on to that review. Let's have a listen to what they're saying. And then maybe there's somebody from Giant Bomb or whoever that I vibe with. They review everything and they like the things that I like. I'll look at their opinion. And so then you get a balanced viewpoint, and that's what Metacritic should do. But the aggregate system and how it works is absolutely fine. The reason why people don't like it and the reason why it's weaponized so much is because of fanboy bullshit. Returnal, to me, is better than anything Xbox has put out and probably will ever put out. I adore Returnal, and it is a lower Metacritic than any of the games we've mentioned in this list. It is. Does that stop me from thinking that probably the strongest studio outside Naughty Dog we have in PlayStation is Housemarque? No. It doesn't. That's my opinion. And that's what I feel like. And I got that from my experience of playing their games. It doesn't matter to me that somebody will put it on there and say, oh, this has got an 82 or whatever. Great. Well, don't play it. You miss out on one of the best games on PS5, you know? Like, it doesn't matter to me what some little scrubbo thinks behind his screen, typing in when he has no idea what he's fucking talking about. The way I would improve user reviews Very different from you guys. What I would do is I would have it so that the user reviews are weighted. So what happens is you come on and you put out a review on there. Somebody writes a review. They write like a YouTube script almost for a review. It's their responsibility to put in the proof of how much they've played, what they've done, everything else into that review. And then it has a like and a dislike button attached to that. And you start building up credence. And as you build up credence and you gain a following from your user reviews, they start having more weight on the overall user review score. So it would mean then that you could then have a couple of critics that aren't in paid publisher positions, but you might say, oh, Big Schlong 69, he's reviewed 7 games and his views are very similar to mine. Great. And it turns out that maybe they start building a little mini community within that, and that has them more weighting within that. But that's a lot harder to weaponize that if then it's something that's been done and it's got real care put into it. And that's how I would do the user scores.
As much as I like the idea of it, I do not think it would work at all. Just because all it takes is the review bombers to put a Reddit thread up or something and say, I've just reviewed this, everyone give it a thumbs up. And all the review bombers will drop their review shitting on the game and then just like every other bad review. And it will just build a community of review bombers. And instead of just them being individuals doing it, it'll actually be a community of doing it. And I don't think that's a good idea.
That's fair. That makes perfect sense. I mean, the thing about it is with the user score, unfortunately, just don't look at it. It's bullshit. It's always bullshit. It really is. And I can't really think of any other way other than just, the cream rising to the top and a good review being out there than the system that I've come up with. I think that no matter how much kind of security and extra things you go through, does it really matter? Not really. People that have any semblance of sense don't look at the user score anyway, because it's just bullshit. It's like a 1-sentence review. Christ. I'll play like a 10-minute fucking trailer and I'll have like a 15-minute review on it. There's no way you can sum up something in a sentence. There's just no way. Not in any way that actually has meaning to somebody. But yeah, unfortunately, Lurian, we're all coming down the side that the Metacritic's fine as is. And that it's more so the problem with the people that consume Metacritic is the issue rather than the system itself. So, sorry we haven't really answered your question, but I hope that we've given you enough insight into our thoughts and feelings on Metacritic as a service. But that's not all. We got another listener question, and this one is from our good friends over at X Marks the Box, an Xbox podcast. And this is where I think from this question we can delve off into a wider topic here. Do you think it was fair of IGN to give the Starfield review to someone who clearly has negative opinions on the game before even playing it, tweeting anti-Xbox and anti-Bethesda tweets since 2020? Should IGN review big games with multiple reviewers and give an average score? Also, if someone who is clearly anti-Sony gets the Spider-Man 2 review and gives it a bad review, how would you react? Good question. Thank you for writing in, Xbox the Box. Appreciate you and appreciate all you do on the other side of the camp. Phil, coming back round to yourself.
This is a bit of a difficult one, really. And obviously this question has come a little bit loaded because of our main topic, I suppose, the Dan Stapleton review. He came out with a 7 out of 10, didn't he, for Starfield? And I think people were a little bit annoyed at that fact. They wanted him to be rating it at that higher sort of 8s and 9s, the similar to sort of other reviewers. But Dan, he is the IGN director of reviews. He is the big cheese over at IGN. So Dan knows what he's talking about. And I think I actually watched the review on YouTube earlier before the podcast, and I felt it was a really honest and really in-depth review of the game. And I'm actually going to watch more of Dan's reviews in the future because I really appreciated what he did. He highlighted some positives with the game, which actually got me a little bit interested in, because I am a PC player as well. I do have a Steam Deck. There might be a possibility that I would be a Starfield consumer at some point. But he also highlighted some negative points as well. But I think he linked those to sort of other games of the past as well. And he kind of said a lot of Bethesda games kind of suffer from these same issues. Now, Dan, he has been guilty of rating some terrible games really high. So I'm kind of in the middle with Dan, but I quite enjoyed his Starfield one. He actually rated, Just Cause, Watchdog, Rage 2 better than Starfield. Now, if you put those in that little sphere there and think, is this game better than that game because he gave a slightly higher review? It's too much of a small sample size there, really. You need to broaden it out to kind of more of Dan's sort of reviews to kind of feel as if you want to subscribe to what he's putting down. And I'm very much going to be in that boat. I'm going to look at a few more reviews before I can fully answer this one, I think. But ultimately, would I care if someone who was anti-Sony gets to review Spider-Man 2? Good fucking luck, because that game is gonna be class, and we all know it's gonna be class. So regardless if you hate Sony, if you have an ulterior motive, I think you're gonna be hard pressed to say this game's gonna be terrible. And I think you're gonna be shown your real light, because it'll be obvious it's a really good game, and then you're coming out saying it's bad. It's going to be pretty damn obvious, isn't it, that you're just saying this just to stir the pot and just to sprinkle in a little bit more of this bullshit between video game consumers. Ultimately, we should all love games, shouldn't we? I love PlayStation, fair enough, but I'm also a PC player. As I said earlier, possibly could play Starfield in the future. So this doesn't tinge my opinion of Starfield in any way. A 7 out of 10, still pretty good. But what I'll actually do is watch a few more reviews and actually probably end up playing it for myself, and then we'll get my review. We'll see what the future holds.
Spence, how do you take this one?
Sure, so with this one, do I think it's fair for them to give someone who's clearly anti-negative Xbox, who has had negative opinions on the game prior to playing it? Like you, Phil, I watched this prior to us recording tonight. I watched the whole review. That doesn't come across at all. He is very, very honest in this review. A few negatives, a lot of positives. And he goes to say he's played Skyrim, he's played Fallout 4. He said he loves Fallout 4. Big Bethesda fan. So does it really matter if he's anti-Xbox, if he loves Bethesda? Because this game's more for... Well, I suppose it's more for Xbox as they bought Bethesda. But he's a big fan of Bethesda. There's even a part where he shows the bugs and the glitches in the game, and he says, but it's such a vast, massive, open game, it's to be expected, and just glosses over it. Whereas if there's a bug like that in, say, God of War, Spider-Man, it'd be the talk of the town, clips all over Twitter. But he just glosses over it and he says, it's a Bethesda game. You've come to expect it.
It's kind of strange though, right? Because I'm a PlayStation guy, right? And I watched that review, and it kind of put Starfield in a positive light. It kind of made me more intrigued about the game. It actually made me want to play the game. And it's really weird that sort of, Xbox marks the box. They're watching the review and seeing it as a negative light. I guess it all just depends on your standpoint, doesn't it?
It's because they wanted this to be their big hit 10 out of 10 game. And to them, it might be. It might be that good for them. In which case, it's a hard pill to swallow, someone else not sharing your opinion on a game that you love. And that is just the way it is. But at the end of the day, it is always just an opinion. And this whole question of should it be an aggregate score between multiple reviews for big games? Not really. I mean, even then, it's still just people's opinion. And sure, getting a broad kind of view is probably a bit of a better way to keep it accurate. This guy's a vet. This guy's reviewed loads of games. He knows what he's on about, and he knows how Bethesda work. And I don't think it really matters too much. But to also answer the question of if an anti-Sony person did Spider-Man 2, I wouldn't give a flying rat's arse. Reviews should be for if you're on the fence for a game, I reckon. Because if you see a trailer like Spider-Man 2, you don't care about the reviews. You're buying that game frame one. Same as Xbox when they were talking about Starfield before seeing any gameplay. And they were like, oh, this is going to be the biggest game we've ever seen. It's just the way it goes. You buy what you want to buy. If you know you're dead set on a game, you shouldn't really care about reviews. You should have your own opinion on it. Don't go watching reviews before you play a game if you know you're going to play it. Reviews should be for when you're kind of tiptoeing about a game, in my opinion. That's my view on reviews. So if there's an anti-Sony got Spider-Man 2, I wouldn't even watch the review. I'm not going to watch any reviews on Spider-Man 2. I'm not going to care about the score, because to me, it's probably going to be an exceptional game. And if it's not, I'll make that opinion myself. I don't care what other people have to say, because I love Spider-Man. I know I'm going to play it. And that's just the way it goes. I think that's what Xbox fans need to kind of do with their games, rather than care so much about what IGN have to say. Just play it for yourself. Enjoy the game.
I think for me, I'm going to come at this, and I'm not coming at you or anything like that, right? I'm just going to say how I see it, right? In terms of Dan Stapleton's review, it was a really good review. I've watched it myself. I've watched it multiple times now, and I've gone out and watched quite a few different Starfield reviews. And the one thing that seems to come up all the time is the inventory management and the fast travel and the amount of loading screens that permeate throughout the entire experience. That seems to be something that many people bring up as a critique. Now, the thing is with a review is that they are, as Phil said earlier, it's an individual opinion. And how much those things bother you and how much you can forgive them is very much in the eye of the beholder. Now, if it was myself, if I have a game, like for example, I mentioned Final Fantasy earlier in the podcast and how the quest structure is archaic and it drags it down a little bit, but it doesn't take the shine off the rest of the game. There could be somebody else who plays that game, and that quest structure and that downtime is enough for them to think like, fuck this game. This game is shit. And that is a valid opinion. That is absolutely valid. If you get something that really annoys you and you feel a detriment to the experience, you have every right to take that down as far as you feel it should go. You have every right to. And Dan Stapleton is a reviewer that, as the guys have mentioned, has been in the game for a long time. Got a lot of skin, and you can't take what one game scores and compare that to another and say like, oh, well, he must think Rage 2 is better than Starfield. No, he probably doesn't. It's a totally different kettle of fish. They're totally different games. You know, like, we'll do a review on, say, a game that can't be mentioned, and we'll say, yeah, it's a 9 or a 10. But I may score MGS a 10. Do I think they're in the same ballpark? No, absolutely not. MGS is way more complicated, way better of a game than, say, the game that can't be mentioned 1. And I adore both, and I would give them both a numerical value of the same. But you can't compare it like that. We've done so many different games that we review on this podcast in what we've been playing, and we throw out review scores left, right, and center. If someone said to me, oh, you gave Tormented Souls a 8 out of 10 because the voice acting was trash and the story wasn't very good, it was just a rip-off of Silent Hill. So are you saying that you actually prefer that to, I don't know, the game that can't be mentioned 7, because I may have given that a 6 or something? No, I prefer the game that can't be mentioned 7, but it's just that I come with different expectations. I expect more, so that's why the scores kind of fluctuate. You just can't do it that way. It doesn't work in that kind of level. The whole point of a review score is there to give you an idea on how that reviewer feels that game lived up to its own expectation, or how it lived up to their experience playing it. And it is on an individual basis. I think that anyone throwing shade at Dan Stapleton or any reviewer who doesn't agree with what they've got is being fucking petty, if I'm honest with you. And we're going to see it for Sony, 100% we are. Because people will get copies of games and they will have a completely different opinion to myself on it. But I'm not then going to say, I'm not going to publicly shame them. There are times where you are right to question. For example, there was a time on the podcast before, I remember, where we were calling out Greg Miller because he was shitting on, I think it was Village he was shitting on, and we were saying that, well, this guy's got no experience with survival horror. He was like complaining about things that are a staple to the genre, like puzzles or something. And that's a fair criticism to bring up to somebody, or to put that out in the open, because they obviously they don't understand what the genre is. But with Dan in this example, he's an old school Bethesda player, and he makes that very clear throughout the entire review. So if anything, his review is someone that you should actually listen to and step back a bit and think, actually, hold on, maybe there's something to this. Now, is it right for him to dock it down as low as he has? I can't say that. It's up to Dan himself and his impression of the game. But I don't think his opinion should be weighted any lower than anybody else just because he feels differently about it. It's ridiculous. I don't think that questioning his opinion with tweeting anti-Xbox and anti-Bethesda tweets since 2020, we were all tweeting anti-Xbox stuff back then because buying Bethesda was fucking bullshit, just like it was with them buying up another big publisher with Activision. Does that mean that when we review Modern Warfare 3, we're now, because we've spoken loads of shit on this, we're then all of a sudden going to come out with 6s, 7s? No, because any reviewer worth their weight, and especially if you're in IGN, the most prestigious kind of gaming review site on the internet, you can distance that. That's different from the product that's in front of you. And I think having the opinion that this has been a targeted attack is just fanboy speak. It's pure fanboy speak. If you come back and look at it with a rational set of eyes, you know that he may feel that way about the game. Fair. Okay. No problem. And that's it. You just move on. I think that's it. I think it's as cut and dry as that. And I don't know, guys, am I being out of line here? I know I've been like waffling on a little bit here, but am I saying anything crazy here?
My question really, to go back to Lewis really, is that if he knew that, well, if he thought that Dan is anti-Xbox and anti-Bethesda, from watching his previous reviews, obviously I'm assuming that Lewis and the Xbox podcast has gone back and watched a few reviews from Dan's sort of back catalogue over an IGN. Why does he care what he has to say? Why does it matter that Dan has come out with this review? Why should it matter to him? Because he already has kind of stated that he doesn't agree with Dan's standpoint on a lot of things. So why do you care about this one? It's just mad. And to start giving Dan heat, and I'm not saying Lewis has or the Xbox podcast has, but there has been people in the community going out and overstepping that mark with Dan, you know, giving him some shit on Twitter, and it's just crosses the line for me. It's just too much. Imagine people were attacking the podcast for some of Spencer's views. It'd be ridiculous. Honestly, that crosses the line for me, and it just gets a bit orcs, really.
I think a lot of what you said, Davey, is actually just bang on, where it's all in the eye of the beholder. You can take what you want with a pinch of salt. You can take it as a nuke to your mental health or your opinion of a game or whatever you want to take it as. It's completely up to you how you take something. And if you bang on with your point of something that you might be able to look past, someone else probably can't. And that is just the way it is. That's the case with a lot of games and just all of us being different as humans and just perceiving things differently. If you don't agree with the review, check out some more. Look at other reviews. Look at people you trust. It's fine. I mean, really, I think it's fine.
I think this is the issue, though, is that because so much of the console fanboy space is driven by Metacritic scores and that weaponization of that, that's why they take it so hard, because IGN have a big weighting, and so it means so much. But if you just distance yourself from that, and you take yourself out of that equation, who gives a shit? Like, who cares, really? Like, when it came up in for Game of the Year nominations, right? And it was and Returnal was up for its year. I knew it wasn't going to clean sweep anything. For me, it won Game of the Year for me, no questions asked, right? But I knew it wasn't going to be, because it is a bit of a divisive game. This is, it's very hard. It is what it is. But it wasn't like as if then I'd go out and then start throwing death threats at people or speaking shit online to Twitter. Oh, this guy gave it a 4 out of 10 because it's a roguelite and you're just repeating the same 5 areas and that's the game. No, like, it doesn't matter to me. And I think that's the way you got to do. You got to distance yourself from what the Metacritic is and stop weaponizing and dunking on games when they don't live up to expectation, which is what happens on both sides of the fandom. And just step back from that whole thing and just say, right, well, I've got the opinions from different people and I know who to trust. And if they're feeling this way about it, then I know that I can then go to that source to be able to get an idea on if this next game is a purchase for me. And that is how reviews should work the entire way. It's why YouTube reviews are so much bigger now than corporate entities, because corporate entities are a little bit nameless. You know, it's faceless, really. You've got like the odd few people like Dan Stapleton, for example, being one that stands out as somebody that you know, right, okay, well, he's been in this for a long time. I can look at his previous body of work. I can get a judgment. This is why YouTube has such a big community for reviewers, myself being a very, very small cog in this entire YouTube thing, in that you build an audience, they know what you like, and they kind of vibe with it, or they don't vibe with it. Each are both equally as important as each other. And then based on how that person takes it, you know if you're going to like or dislike it most of the time. And that's why they had so much value. And that's how you should take reviews going forward. It does take a little bit more work in actually looking at what this other person has reviewed and do you vibe with it or not. But that's on you to do that research. That's on you to do that flicking through and that amount of work on it.
I don't know about you guys, but I quite like a negative review on a game I like. Because ultimately, I'm looking at a game, like take Armored Core, I'm looking at it through rose-tinted glasses. I can't see the problems because I'm just in love with the game. And I think it's quite helpful to actually know what people don't like within a game and point out some of the flaws. Because ultimately, if I'm just watching reviews that align with my views 100%, I'm just watching them to boost my ego. Because I watch them and go, yeah, I'm right. I'm 100% right. Because he said it. He said exactly the same thing. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong, but at the same time, I myself would rather ignore those flaws because there could be something, right, where it could be, let's say load times are quite long, just an example, and you might not really notice. You just get to sit on your phone for a minute or whatever, and then you read on a review, someone being like, the load times are egregious, and then you go back to the game, and then you're sat there and you think, load times are actually quite long, mind. You know what, that is quite annoying. And it might actually sour your view on the game that you loved before that review. So I do agree with you where sometimes it's nice to get that other opinion and sometimes you can kind of be like, well, it doesn't bother me. So I think sometimes it can change your opinion. And sometimes for the better, I think more often for the worse. So that's not something I'm a fan of.
I think ultimately it comes down to how strongly you feel about something and if you're willing to look at the other side of an argument or not. And this is the issue now a lot when it comes to Twitter. And people just in general, they're just not happy to have an open and honest discussion where their own views may get challenged. And I think you should always be in this healthy mindset where you are open to hearing other views. You're open to having your opinion changed. And it may very well be a case that you don't look at something the same way again, but maybe then you weren't looking at it close enough to begin with. And that's it. For example, there is a really big example of this I can use. The Flash movie. It was getting dunked by everyone. Twitter hated it. Review scores, terrible. Rotten Tomato scores, not very good. I went into it with middling expectation and came out fucking loving it. I went to see it twice in 1 week. I absolutely loved it and I couldn't stop raving about it. I was then going on to these different debates that people were having on Twitter and joining in and saying, oh, Joe, I really enjoyed it. I thought that the characterization of the two different Barrys really worked for me. And I found the humor landed and I came out of the film really enjoying it, even if it does have dodgy CG. And that's the thing, though. You just got to be open just to have your opinion change a little bit. And I think what a negative review can do is it, as you said, Phil, it can kind of open your eyes a little bit to, oh, yeah, okay, I can see where they're coming from. And I think that's an important thing to know, is to be able to separate that thing between this is fact and this is opinion. And they share a totally different opinion to me, and that's absolutely fine. And you just got to have thick enough skin to not let that worry you. Ultimately, it's a fucking game that you are just playing. You had no say in the development. You just bought a product. And for some reason, you feel like, and this is just the royal you now, in terms of just people. The people feel like as if they need to stake a flag in the ground, and this is now your new religion. This is something that you bat for and you defend, and you're out there in the battlefield. No one gives a fuck. No one gives a fuck. The Metacritic rating, the only thing that they care about in terms of publishers and developers is that they get a bonus if it scores above a certain point. And that's it. They don't give a shit about what Johnny, Xbox Warrior 1, and PSN Tommy Timmy are battling about, saying that their game's shit and their game's great. No one gives a fuck. And anybody who's got more than 5 brain cells can tell the difference between somebody that is just an outrageous fanboy posting bollocks and somebody that's got a balanced viewpoint and is willing to see both sides. And that's up to the individual to take that and use that knowledge to however they see fit.